Hey everyone, welcome back. It's time for another deep dive. And today, we're tackling those big feelings.
Oh, yeah, the ones that kind of hit you like a ton of bricks.
Exactly. You know those emotions that can totally throw us off balance? Make us want to just like crawl under a blanket and hide from the world.
We've all been there.
For sure. And that's why I'm so excited about our deep dive today. We're going to be exploring big feelings, how to be okay when things are not okay, by Liz Fosslien and Mollie West Duffy.
I love this book. It's like a practical guidebook for navigating those emotional roller coasters that life throws at us.
Right. It's not just about surviving these big feelings. It's about learning to thrive in spite of them.
And one of the things I appreciate most about this book is that it really normalizes these difficult emotions. The authors make it clear that everyone experiences these feelings. It's part of being human.
That's so reassuring to hear. Because sometimes it can feel like we're the only ones struggling, right? Like everyone else has it all figured out.
Oh, absolutely. But that's just not true. We all have those moments of uncertainty, comparison, anger, burnout, perfectionism, despair, even regret.
Wow, you just ran through the whole list of big feelings that the book covers.
Well, they're all interconnected in a way. And maybe we should start with uncertainty, considering how unpredictable life can be.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
Yeah.
So one of the first things the book tackles is this myth that we can ever really achieve certainty in life. It's just not realistic.
Right, exactly. Life is full of surprises, both good and bad.
Like Liz tells this story in the book about her friend who was the picture of health. Super active, ate all the right foods, and then boom, she's diagnosed with bone cancer out of nowhere.
It's a stark reminder that things can change in an instant. And even though we crave certainty because it makes us feel safe and in control, the truth is it's often just an illusion.
And clinging to that illusion can actually create more anxiety in the long run.
Oh, for sure.
There's this fascinating study mentioned in the book that found people were more stressed when they had a 50% chance of getting an electric shock compared to a 90% chance.
That's so interesting.
I know, right? You'd think people would be more stressed knowing that the shock was almost certain.
Well, it seems counterintuitive, but it shows how much we crave that sense of knowing for sure, even if the news is bad.
We want to be able to prepare ourselves mentally.
Right.
The unknown is what really throws us off balance.
Exactly. So how do we deal with that feeling of being off kilter when everything feels uncertain and unpredictable?
Well, the book offers some great practical tips for navigating uncertainty. And one that really stood out to me was the idea of sitting with discomfort.
Oh, yeah. That's a good word.
Instead of trying to push away those uncomfortable feelings of uncertainty, the authors encourage us to actually acknowledge them, to make space for them.
It's about building our tolerance for those feelings so they don't control us.
Right. They suggest practices like meditation journaling, talking to a trusted friend, anything that helps you process those anxieties without judgment.
And it takes practice.
Yeah.
But over time, you can actually train yourself to sit with discomfort and not freak out.
I love that. And they also talk about the importance of reframing our self-talk.
Yes. Our inner dialogue can be so powerful.
Instead of saying things like, I can't handle this, or this is too much, they suggest adopting a more positive and empowering mantra. Like, I am a person who is learning.
It's about shifting from a place of feeling overwhelmed to embracing the learning process.
Exactly. Liz actually gives a great example of using this technique during a health crisis of her own. She was facing a lot of uncertainty and fear, but this mantra helped her to stay grounded and focused on what she could control.
It's a powerful reminder that we always have the power to choose how we respond to challenging situations.
Absolutely. Another strategy they recommend is to identify your specific fears. Because often that general free-floating anxiety, you know, that feeling of like something bad is going to happen, but you don't know what, it can actually become less scary if you break it down into concrete fears.
That makes sense.
They share a story in the book about a student named Carabay who is totally freaking out about starting college. Like full-blown anxiety attack level.
Oh.
But once she actually got to campus, moved into her dorm, started talking to her roommates, her fears started to melt away.
Because she realized that those shadowy worries that had felt so big in her mind were actually much smaller in reality.
Right. It's like that saying, fear is often bigger than the thing itself.
Exactly. Now, the book also stresses that we can't always control the things that happen to us, right? There are always going to be those external forces at play that create uncertainty and throw us curveballs.
True, but what we can control is how we respond.
And that's where the real power lies.
So they offer this helpful tip. Separate the withins, the things you can control, from the beyonds, the things you can't.
It's about focusing your energy on what you can influence, rather than stressing over things that are outside of your control.
Like making plans, but holding those plans loosely, knowing that things might change.
Flexibility is key.
Because if we get too attached to a specific outcome, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment when things inevitably go differently.
Which brings us to another big feeling that often goes hand in hand with uncertainty. Comparison.
Oh yeah, that one's a doozy. Especially in today's world, where we're constantly bombarded with images of other people's seemingly perfect lives.
It's so easy to get caught in the comparison trap and start feeling inadequate.
Like everyone else is doing better than us, achieving more, having more fun, you know.
And social media definitely doesn't help. It's like a highlight reel of everyone's best moments.
But here's the thing. The book makes a really surprising point. Less comparison isn't necessarily better.
Oh, really?
They share this story about a woman named Priscilla who felt like a failure because it took her 7 years to graduate college.
I can see where she might feel that way.
But it wasn't until she started comparing herself more comprehensively, taking into account all of the obstacles she had overcome along the way, that she started to feel proud of her accomplishment.
So it's about looking beyond the surface and acknowledging the full context of our own journey and the journeys of others.
Right. So easy to get caught up in comparing our behind-the-scenes struggles to someone else's highlight reel. And that's never a fair comparison.
Absolutely. And that's why the book offers some helpful strategies for reframing those comparison traps.
Like what?
Well, one is to understand the difference between malicious envy, wanting to take something away from someone else, and benign envy, being inspired by someone else's achievements.
So like, if I see a friend who just got a promotion, and it makes me think, wow, I want to achieve something like that too. That would be benign envy.
Exactly. That kind of envy can actually be motivating. It can push us to learn new skills, set bigger goals, step outside of our comfort zones.
I love that. So instead of letting envy eat away at us, we can actually use it as fuel to grow.
The book even suggests using phrases like, I'm inspired by them, or I haven't done it yet, to help reframe those envious feelings into something more positive.
That's great advice. And I think it's a perfect segue into our next big feeling, anger. I love that. It's about finding that silver lining in envy, turning it into something that can actually benefit us.
Exactly right. And speaking of turning things around, another helpful tip is to remember that what we see on social media is rarely the full picture.
Oh my gosh, so true. It's like everyone's trying to present this perfect, curated version of themselves.
And we end up comparing our messy behind the scenes to their perfectly polished highlight reel.
It's like that saying, don't compare your bloopers to everyone else's highlight reel.
Exactly. The book actually shares the story about a woman named Maria Ramirez, whose Facebook page made her life look super glamorous. But in reality, she was burnt out and unhappy in her high-pressure PR job.
It's a good reminder that we never really know what's going on behind those carefully crafted offline personas.
For sure. So instead of focusing on those surface-level achievements, the book suggests comparing the nitty-gritty, the day-to-day realities of someone else's life.
So like thinking about what their daily routine actually looks like, the challenges they face, the sacrifices they make.
Exactly. Liz shares this anecdote about envying a friend's promotion, but then realizing that she wouldn't want the added responsibilities and stress that came with it.
It's about considering the trade-offs.
Right.
We might envy someone's success, but would we be willing to make the same sacrifices?
Totally. And finally, the book offers this super helpful tip for shifting our comparison lens. Compare present you to past you.
I love that. Instead of constantly looking outward at other people, we can focus inward and appreciate our own progress and growth.
It's a much healthier way to measure success because it's all about your own personal journey.
Speaking of strong emotions, let's move on to another big one that can be tough to handle. Anger.
Oh yeah, anger can definitely be a tricky one, but it's also a really powerful emotion.
I used to think anger was purely negative, but the book's perspective on channeling anger for positive change really resonated with me.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that anger can actually be a source of truth, a signal that something is wrong, and a motivator for positive change.
That's like our body's way of saying, hey, pay attention. Something's not right here.
They actually present anger as a form of compassion, a way of standing up for ourselves and others.
They quote Audre Lorde, who said, anger is loaded with information and energy.
I love that quote. It really reframes our understanding of anger, doesn't it?
Totally. And they also address the double standard in how anger is perceived in men versus women, bringing up the example of Serena Williams' outburst at the U.S. Open.
Oh, yeah. That was a really powerful example of how societal norms often dictate which emotions are deemed acceptable for men and women to express.
It's like there's this unspoken rule that women should be agreeable and pleasant all the time,
Uh,
while men are allowed to be more assertive and even aggressive.
and that's just not fair. We all have the right to express our emotions, including anger.
Absolutely.
Uh,
But of course, it's important to do so in a constructive way. So what are some of the book's tips for dealing with anger effectively?
well, one of the first things they emphasize is acknowledging your anger instead of denying it. Give yourself permission to feel those feelings, even if they're uncomfortable.
Because trying to suppress those feelings just makes them build up inside.
Right, exactly. They share this powerful story about a man named Griffin who was sexually harassed by his boss and initially suppressed his anger. But later, he realized the validity of his anger and used it as fuel to find a new job and stand up for himself.
It's a great example of how acknowledging and channeling anger can lead to positive change. They also emphasize identifying the needs behind your anger. Asking yourself what unmet need or violated boundary is triggering this emotion.
It's about understanding the root cause of your anger, which can help you to address it more effectively.
And then they provide this helpful formula for communicating your anger constructively. What the other person did plus the negative effect plus how it made you feel.
It's a clear and concise way of expressing your anger without resorting to blame or attacks.
Liz even shares an example from her own life where she was feeling angry with her husband, and how using this formula helped her to communicate her feelings in a way that was both honest and respectful.
It's about being assertive, not aggressive, and that's a skill that takes practice, but it's so worth it.
Totally. The book also encourages us to understand our own anger tendencies. They identify three main types: anger projectors, anger stuffers, and anger transformers.
It's about figuring out your own personal anger style and developing strategies that work for you.
Like if you're an anger projector, you might need to work on creating some space between the trigger and your response, giving yourself a chance to cool down before reacting.
Right. They even suggest a specific technique called TIPP, which stands for temperature intense exercise paced breathing and progressive muscle relaxation.
It's a method for regulating your physiological response, which can help you manage those intense feelings of anger before they erupt.
It's a great tool to have in your emotional toolbox.
Yeah.
And the book also points out that women in particular are often socialized to suppress their anger.
It's like we're taught that it's not ladylike to be angry.
Exactly. But they encourage women to develop anger competence, the ability to recognize, express, and channel their anger in healthy ways.
Because we need to give ourselves permission to feel our anger and learn how to express it in ways that are both authentic and constructive.
Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about another big feeling that's become all too common in our fast-paced world: burnout.
Ugh, burnout. I've definitely been there. It's like this feeling of complete exhaustion, both physically and emotionally.
Yeah, and it's more than just feeling tired. It's about feeling cynical,
Yeah.
disengaged,
Mhm.
and ineffective.
I remember a time when I was working on this project that was just completely draining me. I was so focused on proving myself that I ignored all the warning signs, the fatigue, the irritability, the feeling of being completely overwhelmed.
It's so easy to get caught up in the momentum of our work and push ourselves to the limit.
It wasn't until I hit a wall that I realized I needed to prioritize my well-being. Have you ever experienced something similar?
Oh, absolutely. I think most of us have in one way or another. And the book does a great job of debunking the myth that burnout is simply a matter of overworking. It's much more complex than that.
Right. It's about the stories we tell ourselves about work, the pressure we put on ourselves to achieve. It's about our mindset and our approach to life in general.
And that's why a vacation can't magically cure burnout. It might provide a temporary respite, but it doesn't address the underlying issues.
Totally agree. Mollie actually shares her personal experience with burnout in the book,
Huh.
and it's really eye-opening.